So I'm Dr. Kendra Davis. So I've worked in mental health and substance abuse for many, many years. So I started off in the field as a paraprofessional working with women in a substance abuse treatment setting who were also dual diagnosed. I also actually worked a period of time at a mental health psychiatric hospital. It was formerly known as Charter Behavioral Health. So at that particular facility, we had clients of every mental disorder you could think of. So we're talking about adolescent unit. We had what was called a DDMI unit that was for the developmentally delayed clients. And then we also had the geriatrics unit. So this is talking about older adults with mental illness and or substance abuse or things going on in their life. And then we had the Genesis unit. So Genesis was that unit of individuals who had substance use disorder. Then we had a unit for sex offenders and a children's unit that was those children that was like 8 and below. So my experience of working in the field is pretty wide, a wide range. So working at a mental health hospital like Charter, it gave you experience with working with a bunch of different populations. And then you all know I've spent many years of my career in corrections and actually serving as a counselor in correctional settings. And today, now I'm actually serving as the trainer. So with all that being said, we got a lot of experience in this room of individuals who have worked with persons with mental illness, individuals who have worked with individuals with depression, substance use, and a conglomerate of things. So just as a review, there's estimated 26.2% of Americans age 18 and older, that's about 1 in 4 adults in the United States, who suffer from some type of diagnosable mental disorder. So when you think mental disorder, what typically comes to mind? What is a mental disorder? Because way back when, people didn't openly say I have a mental health condition. They said things like, oh, I just got bad nerves. I had a nervous breakdown. Or individuals hid family members up in an upper room somewhere without actually engaging them with the majority of the family because of mental illness. And there is, of course, a big stigma associated with mental illness. So when you think of the word mental illness, what comes to mind? What do you think about? What is mental illness? And a hush fill the room.
I mean, generalized anxiety, depression.
Okay.
Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder.
Okay. Okay.
Some people just, still with the crazy.
Okay. So at one point, folks didn't want to be labeled as mental ill. But now in our country, folks okay with it. Yes, I get me a check. You bipolar. And so many folks have just really outdone the term of bipolar. They have that moment. Sometimes I feel like a nut, sometimes I don't. Between that almond joy mound syndrome. But just because you have mood swings doesn't necessarily mean you bipolar. Now, let me give a disclaimer. There are some folks who need a medication, who need a diagnosis, who don't have one. But then there are some folks who will malinger and know how to work the system in order to get services and those sorts of things. So there are individuals who are dependent upon systems. So with that being said, the estimated percentage of inmates with mental health disorders within the incarcerated population, when we look at the males versus females, did you know 56% of all of the inmate population in North Carolina, 56% of those inmates, male inmates, have a mental health diagnosis? But what about Pookie and Ray Ray and them that don't want to go to mental health? Because here's the honest truth. In our particular system of incarceration, there are certain privileges that may not be granted. Certain jobs may not be given to an individual with a mental health diagnosis or because of the stigma. So there are many individuals in our system, males and females, who go undiagnosed because you know why? They are not meeting with mental health to talk about the audio-visual hallucinations that they actually may be having, so they find ways to cope. So some of you all may remember a previous training, one of the counselors talked about how the offender would sit and look at like their wall there and count the blocks. So in counting the blocks, he was able to tame the voices that he was hearing in his head, because he knew that if he went to mental health and talked about what was going on, what was manifesting in his brain, that he may be taken away from some of the privileges. So said all that to say that these statistics only report those who have diagnoses that are on record. But what about those inmates? What about those individuals who have mental illness that is not on the books? So we're talking about 56% of all the males that are incarcerated and 73% of the females that are incarcerated. Let me ask you a question. Why do you think there's more females on books as actually having a mental health condition versus there's only 56% of the male population, 73% of the female?
Talk about what's going on
Okay.
They seek help more often.
Women are more likely to open up and to talk. Okay? What are y'all's other thoughts in the room? Do you think it's a difference? Could it have something to do with the stigma that's associated? You know, if you cock diesel and buff, you know, that sort of thing, and you on the weight pile, some may perceive that people are going to look at me differently if they know I have schizophrenia, or if they know I have bipolar, or I have some sort of anxiety disorder. So those are some statistics. So let's talk about serious mental illness. So in serious mental illness, several studies conclude that between 15 and 20% of the jail and prison population qualify as having a serious mental illness. In North Carolina, so when we look at the different counties here, we know that North Carolina, we have several prisons all across the state. So we know some of those prisons have more high-profile mental illness because they need more services there. So, but we do have approximately 14.6% of the North Carolina prison population meet the criteria for serious mental illness. So right now, that inmate population is approximately 38,000 people. The number of inmates who are estimated to meet the criteria for a serious mental illness in North Carolina is, can you think of a ballpark number? How many inmates is that? 5,548. So the purpose of this training, if we got 5,548 offenders that are showing up in our treatment program, showing up in the day center, and you as staff are expected to know how to work with them, don't you think you might need to know a little bit about mental illness so you'll know what to look for, so you'll know when someone is actually decomposing, when they're breaking down, when they're having some manifestations of some things, so you'll know how to get them help to actually ensure the safety of all the other offenders and that particular person. Does that make sense to you? All right, let's keep rolling. So a very brief explanation of how we got here. If you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday. This is a quote from Pearl Beck. So let's go back to the future. In the 1800s, we know that mental illness was actually something that individuals were put away in places like asylums, as noted in these pictures here. So in those asylums, you know, different things actually took place. But there was this great hero, or heroine, I should mention, by the name of Dorothea Dix. Who is Dorothea Dix? Do y'all know who she is? Who was she?
Basically started social work and did social reform for mental institutions.
Okay, so definitely she was a trailblazer in helping to advocate for persons with mental illness in this state. So yeah, she did the politicking.
Basically a mental health lobbyist.
Mm-hmm.
She was good at it too.
Right. So she was that person who would advocate. So in the 1880 census of mentally ill persons, the most comprehensive report up to this time, they identified that 40,942 insane persons in hospitals and asylums for the insane. This is also from the 1880 census. 397 insane persons were identified in jails and in prison. A 1930 survey studied over 10,000 arrestees. Only 1.5% were insane at that time. In 1955, the population was 165 million people. The number of state psychiatric beds were 559. Are you all seeing the issue here? So from the 1800s, we had less people, 397 in the jails and prison. But now in the 1900s, look how many folks, state psychiatric beds. But when we start looking in the prison, we said it was over 5,000. So could it be that this great mental health reform, it didn't work? Because although they closed down many of these mental health hospitals, you mentioned Cherry hospitals, and we said, okay, we got this great plan, we're going to save the state some money, we're going to actually open up the gates to the mental health, the psych wards, and we're going to push all of these individuals with schizophrenia, with severe, profound mental illness back into the community, and we're going to wrap them up in wraparound services like community support team. We're going to do all of these things, the ACT team. But where did these people end up? A lot of them ended up in jail, ended up in prisons. So these type of statistics will lead me to believe. Now, I'm not a statistician or anything. I didn't write it, but I read it. I like to say that a lot. So I argue with these statistics. I'm saying, well, this leads me to believe that evidently something didn't work, that there had to be a glitch in the system, that these wraparound services, these implementation of services in the community didn't work to actually empower persons with mental illness in order to be able to function. So this is when we get to this word called institutionalization. Because there are some, just think, if you were raised in group homes, you was raised in foster care, one system after the other, we talk about people being institutionalized. But what about those who are being in mental health wards all of their life? And then suddenly open the doors and you expect these individuals to know how to function in the community? Oh yeah, we're going to match them up with some folks. But then prison and jail feels like home to them because why? They've been institutionalized. Does that make sense? Questions or comments from anybody? Are y'all understanding? We just check for understanding. Everybody good? All right, let's keep rolling. So deinstitutionalization. So we know legislation. There was a bunch of advocating going on Capitol Hill to advocate for a person with mental illness. So this is a little cartoon funny. 1970s, thinking outside the box. Institutionalized mentally ill. So somebody came in with a key that said no more warehousing, no more treatment, just freedoms. So dun, 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 here we go. The folks saved the day. They showed up, opened up the doors to the mental health, psychiatric wards, let them out, said let them go free. We're not going to warehouse these persons with mental illness. We're not going to hold them hostage, so to speak. So we're going to put them out into the community. And that's when we came into the 2000s, this era. And then we found, as displayed in this cartoon here, that many of the persons with mental illness ended up homeless, ended up in jail, or a lot of them living in, conditions that's not favorable for human beings. Does this make sense to you? All right, so let's keep going. So the effects of deinstitutionalization, in 1955, there were 340 public psychiatric beds per 100,000 people. In 2005, there were 17 public psychiatric beds per 100,000 people, 95% reduction. So in North Carolina, there were 232 psychiatric beds available per 100,000 people. In 2005, there were 17 psychiatric beds available per 100,000 people. What is going on? What'd you say?
What is it now? It's got to be less.
Yeah.
It's got to be a lot less.
So what do we do? Where do we send these individuals if we only had 17 beds in 2005 and now some 13 years later, we probably have significantly less psychiatric beds in this state? Many times these individuals end up where? in our correction system, and as correctional staff, as counselors, as we're the voice advocating for, because we've received the specialized training in order to do interventions and to help protect people. Does this make sense to you? So we got an issue on our hands, folks, that as a community, as professionals, and just individuals as a whole, we need to be informed about mental illness and how to help those individuals. So let's keep going. So a census of experts polled for these reports suggests that 50 public psychiatric beds per 100,000 population is a minimum number. In North Carolina, this means that we would need a total of 4,297 beds. Where are we doing that at? Nowhere. But you know where we house those people? In the prisons. All right. So some other statistics here. So increase in our incarceration rates. The number of people in jails and in prison in the United States. In 1980, it was around 501,886 individuals who was incarcerated in the United States. 2014, there was roughly around 2.2 million individuals who was incarcerated. So we're talking about a 500% increase in individuals who've been incarcerated in the United States. So when we start looking at the prevalence of mental illness in corrections, because if we've had a 500% increase in individuals who are actually being incarcerated, you got to know, folks, with the mental health reform, that a lot of those who are going to prison have mental illness. Makes sense? So individuals displaying symptoms, characteristics of mental illness were found to have 67% higher probability of being arrested than individuals not displaying such symptoms. A 2014 study entitled "The Treatment of Persons with Mental Illness in Prisons and Jails, a State Survey," stated the following, that 35,000 public hospital patients versus 356,000 mentally ill inmates. So in North Carolina, we have 3 psychiatric facilities. The largest is Central Regional Hospital with 398 beds. That's nowhere near the 4,000 some they said we needed. In the Mecklenburg County Jail, 1,904 beds, and the Wake County Jail, which has 1,568. Both have as many mentally ill individuals as does the state hospitals. So I'm looking at average numbers of infractions by inmates in North Carolina. So notice this first line is individuals, prisoners with mental health problems. This column is prisoners with no mental health problems. So when we start looking at the infractions, how many are acting out, this actually gives us some insight. So individuals who was incarcerated 0 to 4 months with mental illness had 2.1, the average number of infractions. With no mental illness, 1.7. But notice, as they're locked up, the longer they're locked up, the more months incarcerated, notice there's a significant increase in the number of infractions. So notice here, we went from 2.1, but look, if they've been incarcerated 25 months or longer, we have an average of 11.8 infractions for persons with mental illness. But persons without mental illness, there was still a significant increase in the number of infractions. But the longer they're incarcerated with the mental illness, the more they're going to act out. So we got to know what to do with them. So where do we go from here? We come to places like this, a crisis intervention training that we want to talk about what is going on with mental illness and how we actually prepare to work with these persons. Any questions from anybody? I think we got a video. All right, so let's keep rolling. Oh, it might help if I plug it up to the internet, right? So hang tight for a second. Y'all see the little thing just swirling? I'm like, okay, why is it not playing? Okay. Let me go back and try it again. Okay, so we'll try to come back. Escape. Okay, now they're saying this might take several minutes, but in the world. So sorry about that, y'all. So let's see. All right, here we go. I still didn't get the video to play. I keep passing it. Now y'all can't hear it. Okay.
When I first started in corrections, I would say we don't have time to deal with these offenders.
202 unruly hostile offenders.
We don't care why they're acting out. We got a job to do. So the cell entry, let's mace them, we'll go in, we'll get them, we'll put them on the restraint board, that type of thing.
Face down on the back! Face down!
As I progressed in my career and as I've gotten older and been here for a while, we started trying to talk these offenders out of the states that they're in.
Officer Mark Craig is part of a new effort by the Minnesota Department of Corrections to enhance safety for staff and offenders.
How you doing, Sam?
Crisis intervention training gives staff the tools they need to engage offenders at moments of high crisis, de-escalating the situation before more aggressive methods are necessary.
They said they was going to watch out for me, huh? They said they was going to visit.
In classroom settings like this one, DOC staff engage in realistic scenarios with specially trained actors. Officers who learn these techniques and employ them in their jobs can then become instructors themselves.
The actors are trained. They're trying to elicit a specific response from you.
Run, there's no time to waste. I need it now. Run.
They reward you when you're moving in the right direction. They sting you when you're not. So they more or less control the direction that the scenario goes. And then we will take the time and pause and give them feedback and maybe guide them if they're on the wrong track.
Officers who complete this training use it on the job every day. They'll tell you it takes extra time to listen to offenders, but it's time well spent.
There's potential for injury to myself. There's potential injury to the other officers. There's potential injury for the offenders. And at my age, the wrestling stuff kind of slows down a little bit. And there's a little bit more patience involved. And
most of the time, I don't want to spend 8 hours smelling like chemicals, and the offender doesn't want it. I don't want to risk that chance for staff to be hurt, receive injuries, or the offender to receive injuries. So it was better off for all of us.
While this program draws heavily on the experience of corrections employees, it also brings in expertise from the community. An ongoing partnership between the DOC and the National Alliance on Mental Illness brings advocates and experts to the table.
Another piece of CIT is those partnerships continue after the training takes place. So if agency policy needs to be revisited to support officers who are using CIT skills, we all get together and talk about how can we do this.
You know, we're trained to react. When something happens, we're trained to take action right away. This is teaching people to, hey, take a step back and look at the whole picture and see what's going on before you react. And if it, prevents somebody from getting hurt, whether it's the offender or us, it's well worth the effort.
Okay. Questions or comments about what you saw in the video? Any questions?
Minnesota at the cutting edge for corrections, because you see a lot of stuff coming out of that state that I don't see coming out of other states.
And like the Minnesota model. So I'm not sure.
That's old substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But you just, a lot of videos I see on Minnesota corrections.
Mm-hmm. So I would agree with you that maybe that's like the ideal place that people are using it from home.
Yeah, Hazelden's out of Minnesota, MFBI's out of Minnesota, substance abuse Minnesota models out of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions about that video clip? All right, so let's just jump right in. So this, I think this starts off with a video as well. So let me go.
Big holiday tradition, fruitcake. I love our holiday traditions, like the Christmas tree, where we go out and we chop down a tree and we put it in our living room. Kind of sounds like the behavior of a drunk man, really. Some woman wakes up, honey, why is there a pine tree in our living room? I like it. We're gonna decorate it for Jesus. And then I'm gonna hang my socks over the fireplace. Fill them with candy. Maybe I'll tie some leaves to the ceiling and see if I can get some action. But now I gotta puke on that couch. Merry Christmas. Some people get so into Christmas they decorate their yards. It seems completely backwards. All right, chop down that tree, bring it in here. Take all these lights, put them out there. Oh, I really gotta get a job. He's anti-Christmas. Easter, that's a weird tradition. Easter, the day Jesus rose from the dead, what should we do? How about eggs? Well, what does that have to do with Jesus? All right, we'll hide him. I don't follow your logic. Don't worry, there's a bunny. Ridiculous. Thanksgiving, it's like we didn't even try to come up with a tradition. The tradition is we overeat. Hey, how about at Thanksgiving we just eat a lot? We do that every day. Oh, what if we eat a lot with people that annoy the hell out of us? Oh, he's anti-family. Most of we use holidays so we can eat more. I normally don't have a burger, a broad, and a steak, but it is 4th of July. And I need the energy if I'm going to start blowing crap up. That's what the founding fathers would want. My favorite holiday is Halloween, and not just because women use it as an excuse to dress like prostitutes. You ladies totally do. I'm a witch if she was a hooker.
Okay, so what's so funny? So as we listen to comedians like we just saw in this little clip. Some things are funny to others and some are funny, some things are not. But did you know that the left side of the cortex, which is the part of the brain, the layer of cells that covers the entire surface of the forebrain, actually is the part that analyzes the words, the structure of the joke. The brain's large frontal lobe, which is involved in social emotional responses, becomes very active. The right hemisphere of the cortex carried out the intellectual analysis required to, quote unquote, get the joke. Because have you ever been listening to somebody telling jokes and you're like, I don't get it? Well, one, that part of the brain couldn't analyze. There was nothing that you could relate or to understand, okay. But then when you can relate it, you can analyze the joke, get the joke, then you laugh. But there are sometimes brainwave activity then spread to the sensory process area of the occipital lobe. This is the area of the back of the head that contains the cells that process visual signals. Stimulation of the motor sections evoke physical responses to the joke, such as laughter. So, here's a little quiz for you. Can anybody read this?
The rest can be in total mix and you can still read it without problem.
So did y'all see that? So just that quick, you were able to read. All of this is just jumbled up, but you were able to read and use those different parts of your brain to analyze the information to identify exactly what's being said. So with this picture here, you've probably seen it 100 times. Are you able to see the young woman? Can you see the older woman? Yay, nay. So the older woman, this would be like a silhouette. This is her nose. This is her eye and her chin. The young woman, this is her feather in a cap, her eyelash, her nose. This is like her jaw. And this is a necklace. Do y'all see the difference? So this is dealing with the brain. So here's a brain teaser. So math is taught, but you can't do it. In this problem, find the error. So take a moment, look at it. Where's the error? Ten times 1 is, plus 6 is, so 8 times 2 is, plus 0. Where's the error? How many of y'all say there is no error? How many of you see the error? There it is. Y'all see it?
Yeah.
You see it now? That there's 2 thes in the prayer. But see, our brains is so wired that we see mistakes, we see errors, and we just keep it moving. So in looking at how this relates to mental illness, in this section of the training, we're going to define the ways in which we staff understand our understanding of serious mental illness and how it contributes to a healthier and safer correctional environment. We're going to identify the basic areas of the brain and the basic functions of these areas. We're going to define how information in the brain is processed via our neurotransmitters and how they function. We're going to identify those specific neurotransmitters and the neurobehavioral function. And then, of course, we're going to discuss the stigma of mental illness. All right. So, in working in corrections, why should you have an understanding of the brain and mental illness? So, looking at the basic biology of the brain, some basic brain fun facts. Did you know that the brain, the weight of the brain, is about 3 pounds? Your skin weighs twice as much as your brain. Did you know your brain consists of about 100 billion neurons? Did you also know the brain is made up of about 75% water, and there are no pain receptors in the brain, so the brain can feel no pain. Did you also know your brain uses 20% of the total oxygen in your body? 20 million billion bits of information move around your brain every second. So things are constantly coming in, coming out. You're thinking about things. You're in this training listening to me talk, but you're thinking about your grocery list, what happened yesterday, what you got to do when you get back to work. Did you finish those notes? What treatment plan you got to do? So billions of pieces of information is floating around your brain. So newborns, a newborn baby. Did you read to your unborn child? Play music. So have you heard people talk about when you read to an unborn child that it helps them to develop cognitively? All right. So stimulation, a stimulated environment for a child can make the difference between 25% greater ability to learn or 25% less in an environment with little stimulation. The capacity for such emotions as joy, happiness, fear, and shyness are already developed at birth. The specific type of nurturing a child receives shapes how these emotions are developed. So could that also have an effect on why some of our offenders, if they didn't get this shaping emotion, if they didn't get the nurturing, could that also contribute to the number of revolving door visits in and out of our institutions? Perhaps. All right. Child abuse and the brain. Did you know studies have shown that child abuse can inhibit the development of the brain and can prematurely affect the brain's development? So you start talking about abuse, the focus for their brain's resources on survival and responses to threats in their environment. So hyperarousal is another one of those things. This chronic stimulation of the brain's fear response means that the region of the brain involved in this response are frequently activated. So this is a glimpse of maybe like an MRI or a CT scan of a child's brain, age 3. So this picture here represents the normal brain. But this is the brain of a child 3 years old who've experienced extreme neglect. So remember that ACE study we talked about a couple trainings ago, the ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and how those experiences, those traumatic events, does have an effect on a person's life even as they grow and to develop as an adult. So here we're looking at an example of someone's brain after having been neglected and the changes that occur. Does that make sense? All right, so the different parts of the brain, as we just reviewed or we just talked about, we have the frontal lobe, the peripheral lobe, temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. So the different parts of the brain, the frontal lobe, the focus is on reasoning, planning, parts of speech, movement, emotions, and problem solving. If someone has an accident, or let's say a stroke, or some type of TBI, or traumatic brain accident or incident that affects the frontal lobe, then you may see an ability or some type of trouble reasoning, planning, and their speech. Does that make sense to you? All right, let's go on to, remember this guy, Phineas Cage. The iron rod actually was driven through his eye socket through the top of his head and destroyed a whole lot of his frontal lobe. The damage impacted his personality, that he became less inhibited, socially inappropriate, and effects have been exaggerated over the years. So they talked about, if you do a study of this guy, that he actually was a very quiet, pleasant person, nice to be around. But after this accident where the rod, as you can see in this picture here, the rod went straight from his eye through the top of his head, that he became very inappropriate, hard to get along with, was cursing, just very, a totally different person. It was attributed to the damage done to the frontal lobe. Also, there's many studies that talks about individuals who have different type of tumors that manifest in certain parts of the brain and how that can also change their personality, and it's because of what those different parts of the brain actually do. So there's a picture of Mr. Cage after his incident. So let's talk about the peripheral lobe. So the peripheral lobe of the brain is responsible for movement, orientation, recognition, and the perception of stimuli. The temporal lobe deals with actual perception and recognition of auditory stimuli, memory formation and retrieval, and parts of speech. The occipital lobe, we're talking about perception and processing of visual stimuli, discriminates between colors, process movement. Did you know occipital lesions can also cause visual hallucinations? So sometimes when folks are seeing things, it may not be that they're schizophrenic, because granted we know persons with schizophrenia do actually have audio and visual hallucinations. But there could be a lesion or some type of tumor growing in certain parts of the brain that could actually contribute to visual hallucination. Ever heard people talking about, I see black spots? Or did you see that? I'm just seeing lights, and that could have some things going on in your brain. You may have to see a neurologist because something is going on. Do you have something you want to add? Seeing shadows. Okay. All right. The limbic system, one of the most studied areas of the brain regarding psychiatric disorders, most studied are schizophrenia and bipolar. Now we know dementia, including Alzheimer's type, actually is also affected in that limbic system. Any questions? So do you remember what you was doing September 11, 2001? What were you doing?
I was in school. It was my senior year in high school. And we had just gotten out of the assembly on abstinence.
Okay. Do you remember what you was doing September 11, 2002? What was it about 2001 that made it so that you remember exactly where you were and what you was doing? Could it be the part of the brain called the amygdala? That the amygdala, something catastrophic occurred that the amygdala said, we got to remember that. Central region of fear and conditioning. The electrical stimulation of the amygdala can cause a previously calm person to exhibit fearful and or aggressive behavior. Key role in processing emotions. The size is positively correlated with aggressive behavior. Psychiatrically linked to anxiety, autism, depression, PTSD, and phobias. Because that part of the brain is, the amygdala is the part of the brain that causes you to remember. So even in addiction, when we talk about people, places, and things, that we encourage our clients, don't sit around telling war stories and you know engaging in certain things, because ding ding ding, it's gonna light up that part of the brain, the amygdala, that haven't forgot what that sensation, what that feeling was. So we have to keep in mind that the amygdala is that part of the brain we have to be very cautious and aware of. Did you know the autopsy of Charles Whitman, the formerly gentleman who carried out the sniper attack from the University Tower at Texas in 1966, showed that he had a tumor pressing on his amygdala? Now, I don't know if they used that as a defense or not, but could it be that that tumor had an effect on his decision making? Maybe. So neurotransmitters and synapse, we know that the neurotransmitters actually carry messages to and from the brain throughout our body. Medication and neurotransmitters. All psychiatric medications work by targeting specific neurotransmitters that are believed to be associated with mental illness. So questions. What is the difference between the definition of physical illness and mental illness? Physical illness and mental illness. What's the difference? The brain. So it has to do with physical, could also be related to some malfunction in the brain, but we know mental illness is all brain. So the Surgeon General's report in 1999 showed 71%, so these are the attitudes of Americans related to serious mental illness, that 71% reported mental illness was due to some type of emotional weakness. 65% said it was caused by bad parenting. 45% their attitudes was it's the victim's fault and they can just will it away. 43% reports that mental illness is some incurable disease. 35% report consequences of some sinful behavior. Because believe it or not, some people still think mental illness is like a curse. They're mentally ill, they're cursed. Who did something wrong? Did their parents sin? You know, that sort of thing. But then there are other cultures that believe that persons with mental illness are a gift from God, that they are touched, that they have special powers. So it varies from one culture to the next. 10% believe that they have some biological basis that involves the brain. So stigma is an important word as it relates to mental illness. So these are the labels and things that are attached to individuals with mental illness. So here's a list of serious mental illness according to NAMI's website. Major depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, PTSD, and borderline personalities.
OCD?
It's not listed at. You OCD? Obsessive compulsive. Because there are some that they don't function. They got to wash their hands so many times. They got to count, do all these different things. So when it gets to the point, because there are some folks that have a little OCD, I'm one, but at the same time, we're able to function. But there are some folks who can't.
Like my girlfriend.
So what happened?
She can't function.
If everything ain't right in a certain way.
And it don't go, like his plan. Oh yeah, she didn't know.
Okay, so these are the brain differences in the mental disorder. So this is a normal brain here. So this is a demonstration of the obsessive compulsive disorder. So Claudia, is this your brain?
Yes.
Since you are self-admitting that you have OCD.
No, Mr. Cook admitted that.
Okay.
He made my diagnosis.
Okay. And then we have bipolar disorder, and then we have a demonstration of what the brain looks like with depression. So, the concepts or takeaways from this section is that mental illnesses are medical conditions that disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, and mood, their ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. So just as diabetes is a disorder of the pancreas, mental illness is a disorder of the brain functioning. So mental illnesses are medical conditions that often result in a diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. So when someone has a condition that interrupts their ability to function, meaning doing activities of daily living, not bathing, not grooming themselves, not paying your bills, those sorts of things, that's when we need to take a look to say, no, this just ain't something that you just do, but now we have a mental condition, a brain disorder that's disrupting your quality of life. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. All right. Because mental disorders such as depression display no obvious brain damage, they were long thought to stem from purely psychological process. Brain images is revealing that abnormal activity in brain structures underlies many mental disorders. So this must be a video.
Mental illness, the thing actors pretend to have in order to win Oscars. Now, in real life, mental health can be something of a touchy topic. We don't like to talk about it much. And as one psychiatrist explains, when we do, we don't talk about it well.
Stigma still is a very big issue. It manifests itself in the ways that we think and talk about the mentally ill and in the terms, the words that we use to describe them.
For instance?
Wacko, psycho, cray-cray.
Okay, first, hearing a bearded middle-aged man use the term cray-cray may have already killed that word forever. It's like when your mom says something is on fleek. It's done. It's just over at that point. But second, he is right. Cray-cray is a terrible name to call someone with mental illness. Although, it is an excellent name for a cartoon crayfish who just won a scuttling contest. You did it, Cray-cray. You won the race. The point is, we don't talk about mental illness well. Sometimes even TV personalities with doctor in their names can get it disastrously wrong.
On the next Dr. Oz, everybody wants to know, am I normal or nuts? Should you be worried?
This behavior is... it's not normal.
Have you gone completely insane? Let me tell you, have you gone completely insane? Completely insane people go outside, suck on a rock, and bark at the moon.
What the is wrong with you? Sucking on a rock and barking at the moon is not a sign that someone's mentally ill. It's a sign that they are a wolf with an iron deficiency. You're thinking of anemic wolves, Dr. Phil. You're getting confused. But perhaps the clearest sign of just how little we want to talk about mental health is that one of the only times it's actively brought up is, as we've seen yet again this week, in the aftermath of a mass shooting, as a means of steering the conversation away from gun control.
This isn't guns. This is about really mental illness.
In many of these shootings, we have people who have mental disturbances.
Do we need to do a better job in mental health? You bet we do.
Yeah, it seems there is nothing like a mass shooting to suddenly spark political interest in mental health. Although it's worth noting that Governor Huckabee's state got a grade of D- on mental health care while he was in office. And you can't lecture people on something you got a D- in. It's like passionately delivering a speech on proper English grammar by saying, we need to think better about how we does word stuff. We need to get it did. And the aftermath of a mass shooting might actually be the worst time to talk about mental health. Because for the record, the vast majority of mentally ill people are non-violent, and the vast majority of gun violence is committed by non-mentally ill people. In fact, mentally ill people are far likelier to be the victims of violence rather than the perpetrators. So the fact we tend to only discuss mental health in a mass shooting context is deeply misleading. It would be like if the only time we talked about Coca-Cola, it were in the context of this.
I'm standing here with this ice-cold, thirst-quenching, deliciously satisfying Coca-Cola, and it actually tastes better. Now, more than ever, Coke is it.
Sure, that happened, and Coke was undeniably involved in it, but most cans of Coke are not that one, and it would be unfair if every time you thought of Coke, you thought of that. But if now is our only opportunity to have a public discussion about mental health, then perhaps we should do it. Because in 2013, an estimated 43.8 million American adults dealt with a mental illness, and an estimated 10 million of us suffer from a serious mental illness each year. 10 million. That's almost as many people as live in Greece. And most of us know a lot more about Greece than we know about our mental health system. Think about it, you know at least 3 things about Greece. Its economy is collapsing, Yarny's from there, and Greek yogurt tastes like the ice cream they'd make in a town where dancing is illegal. You know at least 3. And when you look at how our current system deals with severe mental illness, you'll quickly realise it's a mess, and it always has been. We used to lock people up in asylums, which were often so bad they were known as snake pits. And that doesn't sound like an attractive place to live, even if you're a snake. You'd want some kind of snake loft or snake bungalow. I don't know. I'm no real snake agent. And then in the 1960s, President Kennedy signed a bill to try and close as many of those asylums as possible.
Under this legislation, custodial mental institutions will be replaced by therapeutic centers. It should be possible within a decade or 2 to reduce the number of patients in mental institutions by 50% or more.
And that was a really good idea, because when you see horrible places doing unspeakable things to people, you are supposed to try and shut them down. That's why there are so few Quiznos left. But before you get too proud of the fact that we shut those snakes down, it turns out we never followed through and properly funded the community mental health centres JFK had wanted to replace them. All of those patients had to go somewhere, and some of the places they wound up are shocking. For instance, a few years ago, the AP found that nearly 125,000 young and middle-aged mental health patients were being placed in nursing homes. And it's not a great idea to just stick a young person in with some old people and then hope for the best. It's like casting Taylor Lautner in the new Best Exotic Marigold Hotel movie. It's unsuitable for everybody involved in it. And some states have been involved in something called greyhound therapy. And unfortunately, that does not mean getting to hug a trembling dog who's 98% bone and gristle. It's an even worse kind of greyhound, the kind with 4 wheels and a broken toilet.
This is Rawson Neal, the only state-run psychiatric hospital in southern Nevada. Rawson Neal has been accused of greyhound therapy, a practice critics call unthinkable, discharging seriously ill patients too soon, then supplying them with a one-way bus ticket out of town.
I'm sorry, but you cannot just put people you'd rather not see on a bus to another city. If you could, that's how every breakup would end. Look, Greta, it's not you, it's me, but on the other hand, I think you're going to really enjoy your new life in Syracuse. And we have not even got into the most depressingly common place that people with mental illnesses can end up.
2 million people with mental illness go to state and local jails every year. That's meant there's now 10 times more people behind bars than in state-funded psychiatric treatment.
That is terrible. Finding out jails are our largest provider of mental health treatment is like finding out Lil Wayne lyrics are our greatest source of sexual education. No, Darren, you can't smack it up, flip it like a spatula. Where did you even learn that? What does it mean, flip it like a spatula? Would you like it if I did that to your mother? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't, Darren. So don't say it. Look. Using the criminal justice system to treat the mentally ill isn't just ineffective, it's expensive and it's dangerous. Because often when someone is having a mental health emergency, the police will be called. And that can end tragically. By some estimates, an incredible half of all incidents involving the police use of deadly force involve a mentally ill person. And to their credit, some police departments are changing the way they do things, even creating special units like this one.
These officers are experts in what's called crisis intervention training.
Would you say that you really don't want to die, but you want the pain to stop? Would that be? Okay. And you're willing to get some help today?
This woman agrees to get help.
We'll go in there together. You'll ride with us. We're in an unmarked car.
It's all part of a pioneering program where the mentally ill are diverted out of jails and into treatment.
Okay, well that seems really good, but calling it a pioneering program is a little heartbreaking. Pioneering ideas should not be completely obvious things we should have been doing all along. They should be outlandish things that push the limits of the possible, like a fitted sheet that's easy to fold, or marshmallow airbags, or a sex doll without such judgy eyes. Don't look at me like that, Linda. I'm lonely and we both know it. Unfortunately, only 15% of law enforcement agencies even have crisis intervention training programs, let alone special units. And taking that training is typically voluntary. And how can something so essential to your job be voluntary? Take the mascot for the Tampa Bay Rays. We don't let him decide whether or not to wear that costume, because without it, things can get ugly fast. It's important for doing his job right. And look, that's just a tiny fix. Our whole system needs a massive overhaul, which won't be easy. The public safety net for the mentally ill spans Medicaid, which is different across the country, 8 federal agencies who administer 112 different programs that in some way touch on mental health, and the social service agencies in each of the 50 states. It is a clusterfuck. Except that's an insult to clusterfucks, because at least in them there's the potential of a satisfying ending. This is more of a frustrating cluster dry hump of some kind. And that's not to say there aren't programs that work. Let's look at just one, assertive community treatment. It's designed to let those with serious mental illnesses live in the community by providing regular in-home visits and help coordinating assistance in things like housing and employment. Listen to just one social worker explain how it can work.
What makes mental health might not just be a visit to your psychiatrist. It might also mean having your entitlements in place, or it might mean having your rent paid on time. So instead of meeting with a person and talking about how they're doing, how they feel, once a month or twice a month, what we do is everything that it takes to keep people in the community living independently.
That's fantastic. Everything it takes sounds like a much better option than what we've apparently been trying, which is nothing, not anything, very few things, not much, and prison. And yet, in many states, assertive community treatment programs are in jeopardy thanks to everything from budget cuts to Medicaid reimbursement problems. Despite the fact, a study found that these programs pretty much pay for themselves, which is fantastic. You know, government programs are like graduate students on a first date. If they are able to pay for themselves, it's a fucking miracle. And look, again, that's just one program. There are many more designed for many different levels of need. And we, as a society, we have to figure out how to fund them. Not just because it makes fiscal sense, but because it would save lives. And if I remember rightly, there are some politicians who claim to be pretty motivated to address this problem.
This isn't guns. This is about really mental illness.
In many of these shootings, we have people who have mental disturbances.
Do we need to do a better job in mental health? You bet we do.
Okay, fine. Do it then. Because if we're going to constantly use mentally ill people to dodge conversations about gun control, then the very least we owe them is a fucking plan.
All right. Well, he seems to be pretty passionate about it. So with all that being said, it's important to have a multidisciplinary team that can actually engage offenders and individuals with mental health with the right type of interventions, that we're not just sending people to segregated housing or special housing that we still know is the whole, but are we putting systems in place or interventions that we can actually help people to treat them still with the level of respect and get them the services that they need. One of the things he did mention in this video clip was that how a lot of mentally ill persons are ending up in places like nursing homes. Have you all seen that in your communities? That a lot of the assisted living facilities that was once known for older adults is now infiltrated with young adults, middle-aged adults with mental illness who are high functioning, running around with those individuals who are older adults. Because many times the community doesn't know where to put them. So, of course, they will meet that medical necessity for some such housing. All right, so any questions about what we've covered so far? So we started this morning's conversation talking about as an introduction of why we need CIT, and we cover the brain. So we're going to go ahead and break for lunch, and then we're going to come back and we're going to cover schizophrenia, bipolar, and some personality disorders, and then we'll continue with our agenda for today. So if no questions, you all take your lunch break. If everybody can be back by 1. Do you all want a shorter lunch?
What time are we getting out at this point?
Right now we'll be out right around 3:30. All right. So 3:30. If y'all want to take an hour, about 3:30. Okay. So if everybody be back by 12:30, then we can be done. All right. Have a great lunch.